Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So, again, wherever you're joining us, we just want to say welcome. Thank you for being a part of this journey. And so, at Ethos, I think what is a little different about what we do is we approach Scripture, I would argue, in a more responsible way as far as scholarly, historical, factual information goes. And so we spend a lot of time delving over every text, every word, understanding different rabbinical traditions, understanding this is a Jewish piece of literature, right? This is not a Eurocentric Christian piece. This was actually Jewish. And so if I'm going to read this book, I'm going to understand it from that perspective, from a Jewish one. And so we spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, and then we always, at the end, we want to find a way to apply it. And so we spend a lot of time finding ways to apply these messages for everyday 21st century people. And so that's us today, where we're going, where we're heading, all of it. We believe the Bible is so central right now to everything going on. There's so much beauty there. The messages couldn't be more relevant. And so we want to share with you that every single week here at Ethos. And so we have been continuing through our book series, Genesis. And so Genesis, we're going to be finishing chapter 38 today. But a reminder, Genesis, again, was not written as a history book, right? Genesis was not written with specific perfect dates, specific names that all were realistic people who actually lived in 150 years, 90 years, whatever it was. While that could have happened, the point of it was never a perfect historical record, right? That was never the point. The idea behind Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, was to hold on to what it meant to be Jewish, to keep those traditions, the rituals, the stories, the values, to be able to hand that off to the next generation. Because again, they are in Babylonian captivity in 587 BC. And so, one more reminder, Torah, specifically Genesis in our study, is a written response to the fears of assimilation, right? Taking on the other gods like any empire would if they were devoured by the larger ones, like Babylon, Egypt, Greece, Persia, Rome. That's what most empires would do, most nations if they were conquered. But Israel says, no, 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 we're going to hold on to what it means to be Jewish. We're going to stay monotheistic. We're going to hold on to our traditions and our rituals. And so this is the beauty and the purpose of the Bible in the first place, right? And as they go through, they understand a deeper, deeper understanding of the divine, right? And that's really the purpose why many of us show up every single week to Ethos. So let's delve into chapter 38. Last week we went 1 through 11, verses 1 through 11. Today we're going to move through 12 through 20. Now, here's the thing about 12 through 20. The story gets kind of interesting. There's some interesting plot twists. But for the most part, what you'll see as far as rabbinical interpretations here, most rabbis, they'll say this phrase over and over again. They'll say, notice this. And then they'll explain some interesting sentence or phrase or word in this section. And so I'm going to try to do that with you today. I'm going to read through the verses. I'm going to stop and I'm going to say, I want you to take note of this phrase or this word or whatever it is. Take note of this because there's a lot of those in this section today. So reminder again, this story of Joseph that we're about to delve into, not about just some kid with a fancy coat, right? It's the story of Israel. It's the story of Israel learning how to shift and change, move through the highs and the lows, all while holding on to the promise that the divine has a plan, right? The divine has a plan for us. We're going to make it through this time of pain and brokenness in the middle of exile. That's the idea. And so in the middle, right? As we move through Joseph, before we really delve into his time in Egypt, we have this odd section, right? Chapter 38, a very weird, almost out of place section. And so we have the story of Judah. And so I won't read the whole thing. We read it last week, but Hans-Jörg Wunsch, he brings up this idea that, look, Judah and his story here with Tamar is kind of tossed right in the middle. And the reason for this is to show that Judah is worthy to be the next leader of Israel, right? Judah's worthy, and here's why he's worthy. And so many, again, people will say, this story of Joseph is really this idea of this bookend. It's Judah here in the beginning, it's Judah at the end, Joseph in the middle. But everything Joseph does will kind of emulate how Judah shifts and changes. So Judah in the beginning, we find out he's got some rough marks, right? He's not the Judah we think should be a leader yet of Israel. How did he get here? Well, you're going to find out. Right, here's some interesting information about Judah and how his seed kind of moved and changed. And so this section, again, the question of why is it inserted here? It's again to show how Judah becomes Judah. So here we go. Let's delve in verses 12 through 30. So here we go. I'll read it and then we'll delve in. A lot of verses. Here we go. Many days passed, and Shua's daughter, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was consoled, and he went up to watch over his sheep shears, he and Hira, his Edolamite friend, to Timnah. And it was told to Tamar, saying, Behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So remember who Tamar is, right? Tamar was supposed to be Onan's wife, and she was supposed to continue to bear children, and yet they threw her out, right? Cast her out, sent her back to her father's home. And Judah was kind of responsible for that. And so Tamar comes back in the story here. So she finds out that Judah is going to tend the sheep, right? Shear the sheep. So verse 14. So she took off her widow's garb, covered her head with a veil, and covered her face, and she sat down at the crossroads that were on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, but as for her, she was not given to him for a wife. Yeah, so she notices, right, that the son that Judah said was promised to be her husband isn't given her, is he? So we find out Judah does not hold up his end of the deal like he promised. And she takes note of this. And what's a woman to do? Right? What are you supposed to do? If you're a widow now, you're back at your father's home, what do you do? Continues the story. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she covered her face. Verse 16. So he turned aside toward her to the road, and he said, Get ready now, I will come to you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What will you give me that you should come to me? So again, this is her plan, right? She dresses up like the harlot. And now she's gotten Judah's attention. And Judah says, I want you, right? What can I do to have you? She's got a plan, right? And he said, I will send a kid from a herd. And she said, only if you give me a pledge until you send it. So he said, what is the pledge that I should give you? And she said, your signet ring, your cloak, and the staff that is in your hand. So he gave them to her, and he came to her, and she conceived his likeness. Then she arose and went away, and she took off her veil, and she donned her widow's garb. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his Adullam friend to take the pledge for the woman's hand, but he did not find her. Interesting, right? So he asked the people of the place, saying, Where is the harlot who was at the crossroads on the way? And they said, No harlot was here. We haven't seen a harlot. So he returned to Judah, and he said, I have not found her. And the people of the place also said, No harlot was here. So Judah said, Let her take them for herself, lest we become a laughingstock. Behold, I sent this kid, but you did not find her. Now it came to pass about early, after nearly 3 months, that it was told to Judah, saying, Your daughter-in-law, Tamar, has played the harlot, and behold, she is pregnant from harlotry. So Judah said, Bring her out, and let her be burned. 25. She was taken out, and she was sent to her father-in-law, saying, From the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And she said, Please recognize whose signet ring, cloak, and staff these are?" Judah recognized them, and he said, "She is right. It is from me, because I did not give her to my son Shelah." But he no longer continued to be intimate with her. And it came about at the time she was giving birth that, behold, there were twins in her womb. Of course, right? The story's going to repeat. "And it came about when she gave birth that he, the infant, stretched out his hand. So the midwife took and bound a crimson thread on his hand, saying, 'This one came out first.' And it came about as he was drawing back his hand, behold, his brother emerged, and she said, 'With what strength you have strengthened yourself.' And he, Judah, named him Perez. Afterwards, his brother emerged, the one upon whose hand the crimson thread, and he named him Zerah." So it's a mouthful today, but we're going to go through it. Let's look at some of these verses. Verse 12. Notice this. "Many days passed. Shua's daughter, Judah's wife, died. Judah was consoled. He went." Basically, he's going there to the sheep herders. So the idea here is Judah, he's going to oversee his wealth, his property. He's going to oversee the blessings that he's been given, right? After his wife has passed. But notice this, there is another interesting thing here that most rabbis point out, and this is it. Nahum, to repent. And this is where this word here comes from, consoled. Most people are going to interpret this consoled as, oh, he's sad. They're talking to him. They're doing this. But the word actually, Nahum, it should be translated to repent or change one's mind. Interesting, right? And so Judah, check this out, after experiencing a loss of his own, he begins to shift. Again, you're going to find very subtle shifts with Judah. Something's going to shift. And truth be told, it's less about Judah and it's more about the story. The story is about to shift. And so he's going to begin changing his mind. And most rabbis will point out this is where the story of Judah and the character begins to turn. The story begins to turn. And it's going to turn toward justice. It's going to turn toward justice for not just necessarily Tamar, but the people of Israel. There will be a moment when things shift, when minds are changed, and we move toward justice. And this is a central idea to be a Jew, right? For Judaism, we turn toward justice. If we just hold on long enough to the values of again, freedom, life, liberty, these ideas, if we hold on to them long enough, justice will shift, right? We will turn toward justice. Good things will happen. And that's the idea here of Nahum. Cool, right? All right, let's keep going. Tamar says, "Behold, your father-in-law is going up there." She notices this. And then verse 14. Notice this. "So she took off her widow's garb, covered her head with a veil, and covered her face, and she sat down at the crossroads." Now, many of your different versions are going to say different things, right? Elaine, there's going to be a couple other words there, but crossroads is probably the best interpretation I could find here. It actually has some really deep meaning, and we'll get there. "That we're on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up, but as for her, she was not given to him as wife." So basically, she finds out Judah going to shear these sheep. She finds out she's not been given to the son that she'd promised. And so she's got to be crafty, right? She's got to find a way to be crafty here. She's got to find a way to shift the story. And what you'll notice is this happened with Jacob, right? This happened with Abraham. This happens over and over again in the Jewish stories. The individual who is the hero is often crafty. They're the ones that when things don't turn toward their way, toward life, whatever it is, when they have been purposely hurt by others, they find a way to be crafty in how they respond. And notice this idea of crossroads. Crossroads. In life, there are many crossroads. And like Tamar, we must learn to take the path or spring that leads to life. And so this word crossroads could mean two paths, but it also could mean two different fountains that both bring water. right? Or bring similar water. And so the idea here, when we're at a crossroads, we have to ask the question, which direction is going to bring more life? And so most rabbis say here in this moment, Tamar's at a crossroad, and she's asking the question, I could go this direction or I could go this direction. Which one is going to bring life? I could deceive my father-in-law. Will it bring life? Or I could continue just doing what I'm doing and living in my father's home and being a disgrace. Which is going to bring life? And she realizes the deception, right? The cunning action is going to be the one that brings life. And I know that sounds totally counterintuitive because in Christianity, we're told over and over again, be honest, don't be deceitful. But the idea here, again, is something far deeper. Learn, ask the question, what will bring life in a more abundant way? And we'll get to that in a minute, this idea of deceit, but we'll get to it, I promise you. So hold on to it. We'll get back to it. But let's keep going. When Judah saw her, right, she put on these different garments. She's being deceitful. She's being cunning. When he sees her, he thought she was a harlot because she covered her face. So notice this word. The word saw, it's interesting here. It means to fully see. So most interpretations say he saw her face at this point. Interesting, right? Because it doesn't seem to be the case here. But almost all rabbinical traditions will say that. Because the tradition of a harlot, that you may not know, is that what they would do is when a man approached, they would often uncover their face. Because in Eastern culture, you were supposed to cover your face in front of people, specifically men. But a harlot would often pull their garment down, right? And other places on their garment. And this is why this individual says this, this historian, rather out of modesty, Tamar had always covered her face in her father-in-law's home. Thus, when she disguised herself as a harlot and revealed her face, Judah did not recognize her. This midrash amplifies the positive qualities of Tamar, who generally comparted herself extremely modestly. So the idea here again, women were expected to cover their faces in the presence of men of power. But the harlot would show their face. But notice what Rashi says here. He was so selfish. Basically, Judah was so selfish at this point, he didn't even recognize his own people. He didn't even recognize family. And so there's a lot of interesting connection here if you're an Israelite. Have we gotten to the place as a nation where we become so self-absorbed that we no longer see each other as family? That's the idea, right? In the middle of captivity, are we so focused on just getting by, me, that we forget that we're family? We should be looking out for one another. What a beautiful message for them, but I would argue for us right now too, right? So good. Let's keep going. Because if we're going to survive, we have to look out for one another. That's the idea. Verse 16. So he turned aside toward her to the road, and he said, "Get ready now. I will come to you." Right? He's ready to, he's ready to do it, right? For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So essentially, he's looking for his own pleasure here, right? Playing off what we just talked about, selfishness. But Tamar, she's crafty. Tamar understands, she knows he's selfish, and she uses this to gain the blessing, to fulfill the promise. Verse 17, I will send a kid from the herd. And she said, only if you give the pledge until you send it. So this idea of pledge, notice this. This is a practice, basically, this idea of sending the goat. It's basically saying, I'm going to honor whatever agreement you say we're going to have. So I'm going to honor that. But she has a bigger plan, right? The widow who's been marginalized is going to find a way to gain the blessing. Right? The downtrodden, they will find a way to gain the blessing, which again is Israel, right? Even though we have been broken, even though we are in the middle of captivity, we will find a way to gain the blessing, to fulfill the promise. So good. Watch this. Jesus says this in Matthew 10, verse 16. And when I read this and this idea of deception, I had to smile a little bit because it is so deeply connected to Judaism. Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So, because the deck is stacked against you, because tomorrow you keep getting just the shaft over and over again, right? You no longer are being part of this family. You get pushed out over and over again. You can't win, and because the deck is stacked against you, Jesus says to his people, but also to Israel as a whole, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. I love this so much. And you'll find this phrase here over and over in the Old Testament as well. But the idea here is, look, we have to be cunning. We have to find ways to create life wherever we are, but sometimes we have to be very cunning with it. But notice that innocent as doves, our reasoning, our intention should always be to bring life. Right? It should not be a selfish intention. It should be one in which we try to bring life everywhere we go. But sometimes we have to be a bit tricky. And this is why Jesus over and over again will do interesting things. We've talked about turn the other cheek, right? Give the cloak over, walk a mile, walk two if the soldier asks you to go one. It's brilliant. It's essentially turning power upside down by using your cunning. So be wise, right? Be as cunning as a serpent, innocent as a dove. This is what Tamar is doing. And this is what Israel is being called to do in the middle of captivity. Verse 18. So he said, what is the pledge that I should give you? And she said, your signet, your cloak, and the staff that is in your hand. So he gave them to her. Again, think about this. He gives all of this to her. Was he really in that need of having intercourse? Well, no, that's not even the point of the story, right? He gives it away. He gives it away. This is obviously significant, right? We have heard this story before. Someone's not aware of the deeper blessing, right? We've seen this with Esau and Jacob. Tamar is just another Jacob, essentially. And so it continues. He just gives it away, the signet ring, the cloak. But notice this. One historian writes this, the signet ring bore the wearer's family seal, which was extremely valuable object on which one could even buy goods. So he is willing to just give that away. Are you seeing this? He gives it to her. You don't just give that thing away, do you? He is not aware yet of the power of family, of the deep importance of the promise that you will be a great nation someday. He, like Esau, doesn't understand the blessing. He doesn't understand the promise, the gift. And so what does he do? He just hands it over, right? And the cloak, notice this, the cloak was to cover a man. When removed, the individual was exposed. So Judah essentially has exposed now his selfishness. He's exposed the fact that he does not understand the blessing, right? He doesn't understand the greater understandings of the promise of Abraham. That's another thing a Jewish person would also notice. And lastly, he doesn't understand that this is my daughter-in-law, right? He's misunderstanding everything. He's missing all the cues. And so he's become totally open. He is another Esau at this moment. Verse 19. Then she arose and went on her way. She took off her veil and she donned her widow's garb. So again, notice this, the donning of the widow's garb, that phrase means she basically left the harlot garb. She goes back to allowing her community to see her as a widow, right? To see her as helpless, innocent as a dove. Right? A pretty great idea here. If you've just done some trickery, some cunning, she goes back to be, the nice poor widow, right? Really kind of fun. Verse 21. Judah sent the kid by the hand of his Edomite friend to take the pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. He wants his stuff back, right? Except the problem is she's not there. Any Jewish person reading this would be on the edge of their seat because they're asking the question now, what's going to happen? Right? How's he going to get it back? He needs those things, right? He needs the cloak. The family cloak, which would have been really important, the royalty. He needs the signet ring. He needs these things. This is really embarrassing if he doesn't get them back. And his staff, again, a staff would have been something important for a Jewish man as well, denoting not just royalty, but also age, all of this. He's given those things up. Very embarrassing. So he asked the people of the place, saying, "Where is the harlot who was at the crossroads on the way?" And they said, "No harlot was here." It's brilliant. It's a great story plotline, right? A great twist. So verse 22, so he returned to Judah, and he said, "I have not found her." And the people of this place also said, "No harlot was here." Right? So Judah said, "Let her take them for herself." Basically, well, let her just keep them, right? Really embarrassing, because he says, "I don't want to be a laughing stock. Behold, I sent this kid, but you will not find her." He is very concerned about his how he is seen with his community, isn't he? Again, very selfish. He does not want to become the community joke. And so he is willing to leave the signet ring, the staff. He's willing to leave the cloak. He's leaving all of those things. And many rabbinical traditions will say it's at this point that Judah begins to experience some humble pie. Right? Judah begins to realize, oh, okay. Right? It's at this point that he begins to shift. And the Judah at the end of the Joseph story, this is the Judah we see. He experiences humility, and that's going to cause him to do the right thing. Now, he still has an opportunity to do the right thing, so let's keep going. Verse 24. Now it came about 3 months later that it was told to Judah. So 3 months she's beginning to show, right? She's pregnant. And so your daughter-in-law, Tamar, has played the harlot. And behold, she is pregnant from harlotry. So Judah said, "Bring her out, let her be burned." Right? Again, the irony is so rich in the story, isn't it? But notice this, Tamar, she becomes pregnant. Again, it would have seemed without a husband. And so obviously the assumption is going to be she's become a temple prostitute during this cultural time. And so according to Hebrew law, you would have had to take her out and burn her at the stake. That would have been what you do. And so Judah, he's about to experience more humble pie. So not only has he experienced this embarrassing loss of his stuff, right? Now something else is going to happen. And here's what happens in verse 25. She was taken out, and she was sent to her father-in-law, saying, "From the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant." So good, right? And she said, "Please recognize whose signet ring, cloak, and staff these are." So she drops the bomb. She drops it. But notice that she does it in a peaceful, loving way. She doesn't do this in front of the whole community, right? She doesn't want to embarrass him publicly, which is really interesting, right? Harmless as doves. Cunning as a serpent, but harmless as a dove. What a beautiful picture here of what Israel's being called to do. Right? Even though you're in the middle of captivity, you don't have to hurt your enemy, do you? You can trick, you can be cunning, but you also have to be kind. And so she finds a way to be kind here and lets him know, look, I'm pregnant by you. Dun, 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 right? Total plot twist. And so Judah recognizes them. Of course, he looks him over and says, yep, those are mine. Right? Oh, to be Judah in this moment. She is right. It is from me, because I did not give her to my son, Shelah. He notices here, he takes the opportunity to admit his wrong. This is the turning point for Judah. He admits his mistake. I promised I would do this, and I didn't. And it's because of this that she is in this place in the first place. And so he begins to, out of humility, he begins to do the right thing. And unfortunately, it took him many, many mistakes to get to this place. But again, a deeper message to Israel is, look, yes, we've made mistakes over and over again, but let's find a way to bring restoration finally. Let's do the right thing here. and he has the chance here. And so but he no longer continued to be intimate with her. So the idea here, again, well, she's supposed to be married to his son, right? There's some laws that could be broken there. So he does the right thing there too, and he does not sleep with her again. Out of this, though, out of the cunning, out of this cunning moment, and out of learning to be loving toward your enemy, look what happens to Tamar here in the rest of the verses. In verse 27, it says, she was giving birth, and notice this, twins. Where have we seen the story of twins? Again, yes, it's the repeat. It's a repeat of the story of Jacob and Esau. But there's the twist. There is a twist here. She has twins. And again, any Jewish person reading this will note the similarities between the stories, because repetition is how they told stories. And so most rabbinical traditions will bring this up over and over again. This is the story of Jacob and Esau. However, restoration and justice is turning toward, the injustice is turning toward justice here. And you're going to see a twist on this story. And it came to pass about the time they gave birth that the infant stretched out his hand. So the midwife took and bound a crimson thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. So the crimson thread, interesting here. There are all kinds of like deep ideas attached to this crimson thread. Many will like point out the ritualistic kind of atonement traditions that they did, bleeding the lamb, the goats. Others will bring out Jesus, the redemption story. What I've noticed here is this is probably the best one. It is very, as Leo and I were talking about, it's kind of nerdy. It's a little bit nerdy, but I'm going to read a little bit to you. During the Second Temple period, the scapegoat was tied with a crimson thread. While the Torah requires a crimson thread as part of the purification ritual for skin disease, it does not mention it by the scapegoat. So the idea here is this is this is basically a purification ritual that they would use this crimson thread. So the idea here is it's the first son. This birth is going to be a renewal and a moment for Israel, Tamar, Judah to start again. It's a moment where all of the old is done away with and the new can give birth. This is the idea. All of the past sins that Judah and his people have done are going to be done away with because the new life is about to give birth. And in this new life, there's purity, there's newness, there are new opportunities to do good, right? And that's the idea here. And what you're going to find is now the story of Joseph will continue. And what happens when Israel has a chance to do good, we'll find out, right? And so it ends with this. Afterwards, his brother emerged, the one upon whose hand was the crimson thread, and he named him Zerah. So essentially both brothers, instead of one brother Esau, one brother Jacob, one being the good side, one being the darker side, what they bring out here is, no. Both sons are going to bring life. Both sons are holding on to the promise of new life emerging. Pureness, newness, wholeness, righteousness. Both brothers are holding on to the crimson thread. So good. And so the challenge for Israel, of course, was this. Out of new life, when you escape captivity, hold on to the crimson thread, right? Don't allow yourself to continue the same cycles of brokenness that your brothers and sisters of the past have done. Hold on to the crimson thread. Let this be a new birth beginning. Good? I know, so good. Next week, we delve into the story of Joseph again in Egypt. So fun. I'm excited to do that with you, but I wanted this section to be an interesting one because we usually jump through it, don't we? Most of us just kind of skip it over. So I started thinking, how do we take it home? What elements could we say we could apply to today? And so this idea of how to approach conflict with wisdom, this one hit me. I don't do so well every once in a while with this. I'll get every once in a while I'll get frustrated or I'll allow something to kind of throw me off. Like you, I sometimes make mistakes and I don't allow wisdom to guide me in conflict. And so I started thinking about this and I looked at some really interesting words from Shammai, which was one of the many rabbis that Jesus quotes, but Shammai is one of them that he'll quote off and on in his teachings. And so I kind of put them into more of a more modern version. So I'm going to read those to you now, but he actually gives really interesting perspective on this. So in the middle of conflict, one of the first ways Shammai says to deal with it with wisdom is first to ask questions. So when you're in the middle of conflict, like Tamar, ask the question, what can I do here that's going to bring life? And how can I follow that, right? I could do this, but what would happen if I did this? Well, I could get fired. I could ruin a relationship. Ask questions. Ask questions of the person, of the situation. Ask questions. I think for me, if I could just do this one thing more often, I think I would have far more peace in my life. Asking questions. So good. Number 2, show restraint. Again, when you're in the middle of conflict and things are getting heavy, it's so easy to lose it, isn't it? But just reminding yourself, I am going to show restraint here. I'm not going to lose it. I'm not going to do the thing that I'm going to regret later. I'm going to show restraint. I'm going to do the right thing and not do something I'm going to regret. Show restraint. Easier said than done. Number 3, seek guidance, advice. When you're in the middle of conflict, learning to step away and asking advice of people who are far wiser than you will oftentimes, according to Shammai, will oftentimes bring about a peaceful connection. Or at least you can part not as angry enemies, right? You can at least just part knowing that the conflict has been somewhat dealt with. Yeah, really good. And then the last one, follow the wisdom given. He makes a really strong point here, and he says, after hearing the wisdom, don't just walk away, actually put it to practice. And I think for me often, I'll read the book and I'll think that's really good advice, but I won't always follow it. Follow the advice that you get. Follow the wisdom you're given. Actually do the thing. Everyone, I hope you enjoy this. This was a lot of fun for me. Again, taking a section of the Bible that typically is skipped over, finding really interesting stuff here. So good. It's what the Hebrews did. It's how they approach the Bible, and I'm so honored to do this with you weekly. And so as always, please consider going to ethos-church.org/donate. We're a tax-deductible donation organization, and we really depend on those donations to continue what we do. And so every week, all of the time and energy we put into it, we just want to say thank you. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for joining us every week and giving those donations. It really does help to keep us moving in this direction of finding beauty and value in the Bible. If you want to join us online with awesome discussions, Ethos Living Rooms is the place to go. And lastly, hit subscribe, share the videos, hit the like button, share these with everyone you know. I'm so excited to have that playlist of just hundreds of different videos over one book that typically people will skip so quickly through. Everyone, thank you so much for joining. I can't wait to see you next week when we delve into the story of Joseph. See you next week.